She stomped onto my porch without knocking, clipboard in hand, eyes scanning my cabin like she owned it. This wasn't the first time a so-called HOA Karen crossed the line, but when she stepped inside to critique my decor, she froze. Right there, on my wall, was the badge that told her she'd picked a fight with the wrong man, a federal agent who doesn't take kindly to trespassers. Let us know where you're watching from today, and if you're new here, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to join our growing community. The mornings up here in the mountains have a kind of silence that feels sacred. I was on my porch, sipping black coffee from my favorite enamel mug, watching a hawk circle lazily above the tree line. The air was sharp and cool, carrying the smell of pine and last night's wood smoke from the cabin's chimney. I built this place for mornings like this where time slows down and the rest of the world feels 100 miles away. That peace shattered when I heard tires crunching on my gravel driveway. I don't get unexpected visitors out here. Most folks know this road leads nowhere except to my land, and I like it that way. The sound grew louder until I spotted a spotless white SUV, too shiny to belong in these woods, barreling down my driveway like it had every right to be there. The SUV screeched to a stop in front of my porch. Before I could stand, the driver's side door flew open. Out stepped a woman who looked like she'd been dropped here straight from a city office. A bright red blazer, pencil skirt, and high heels on gravel. She clutched a clipboard like it was a weapon. Her posture was stiff, her expression tight and judgmental, like the whole world was out of order and it was her job to fix it. "Morning," I said, rising slowly, coffee in hand. "You lost." She didn't answer. Her sharp gaze scanned my porch like she was appraising property for auction. Her eyes stopped on the wreath I'd hung on my door last winter. It was made of pine branches and twine, nothing fancy, but she looked at it like it was offensive. Then she clicked her pen and scribbled something on her clipboard. "This decor is not compliant with HOA standards," she said, her tone clipped and cold. "That wreath is far too large, and the wind chime unacceptable." For a second, I thought I misheard her. I set my coffee down slowly, trying not to laugh. "Oh, lady, there's no HOA out here. This is private land." Her chin lifted in that self-important way only someone like her could manage. "I represent the Lakeview Community Association. All properties within the district are being brought up to standard. Your cabin falls under our jurisdiction now. We're standardizing exteriors to maintain property values. Yours is unsightly." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Lakeview. That's 4 miles south. I don't belong to any HOA. I bought this land outright. No strings attached. Her lips tightened like I'd said something personally insulting. "There's been a county reassessment. Whether you signed or not, these guidelines apply." She tapped her clipboard with the pen. "That firewood stack. It needs to be moved. It's an eyesore. My firewood. The same stack I split myself every fall and keep near the porch so I don't have to dig through the snow come winter." I stepped down off the porch, boots crunching on the gravel. "You're kidding me. That stack is my heat source. I'm not moving a damn thing." Her eyes flickered with annoyance, but she didn't back down. "If you'd like to avoid a formal complaint, you'll comply. This is your one warning." I stared at her for a long second. The gall of this woman. "Ma'am," I said slowly, "you're trespassing. Turn that SUV around and leave." She acted like I hadn't said a word. Instead, she stepped right onto my porch, her heels clicking against the old wood boards like nails on a coffin. "Your cabin is bringing down the overall aesthetic." "That mismatched paint." "Mismatched paint?" I interrupted. "That's cedar stain. And it's been on these boards longer than your HOA's been breathing down people's necks." Her pen scratched another note. "Defensive attitude. Non-compliance likely. Recommend follow-up visit." Follow-up visit. I took a step closer, standing between her and my front door. "There's not going to be a follow-up. This is private property. I'll ask you one more time. Step off my porch." She gave a little smirk, the kind of smug grin that said she was used to getting her way. "You can't stop me from documenting violations. I have authority here." Authority. That word set something off in me. Years of working as a federal agent had taught me about real authority, and this woman had none of it. Still, I kept my voice level. "Ma'am, you've got about 2 seconds to get back in your car before this turns into a problem." Instead of listening, she leaned sideways, peering through my cabin door like she was sizing up my living room. That was the last straw. I stepped in front of her, blocking her view. "Do not cross that threshold," I said. She tilted her head, almost daring me. And then, without another word, she stepped right past me and into my cabin. I felt a surge of anger, the kind that makes your blood run hot. She had no idea who she was dealing with. No idea that the badge hanging on my wall wasn't some cheap souvenir, it was the real thing. And the second her eyes landed on it, I knew everything was about to change. The moment she stepped into my cabin, I felt every muscle in my body tighten. That was my home, my sanctuary, and she just waltzed in like it was open for inspection. Her heels clicked across the wooden floor as she started glancing at the furniture, the photographs on the mantel, even the quilt draped over the arm of my chair. "This interior," she muttered, jotting notes on her clipboard, "completely non-standard, dark tones, cluttered arrangements, mismatched furnishings. Frankly, this doesn't reflect the values of the Lakeview community." I followed her inside, my jaw set tight. "Lady, I've been polite, but you just crossed the line. This isn't your community. It's mine, my land, my cabin, my rules. Now get out." She didn't even look up from her clipboard. "Threats won't get you anywhere. If you can't follow guidelines, I'll have to escalate this to the board and possibly county enforcement." County enforcement? I almost laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You really think the sheriff's office gives a damn about my quilt or my woodpile?" She turned to face me, her chin raised like a queen surveying a peasant. "We'll see. I've handled tougher cases than this. Men like you think you can do whatever you want because you're out here alone. But communities have standards for a reason." I took a slow, deliberate step closer, closing the distance between us. "And what makes you think you can walk into a man's home without permission? You're not just trespassing, you're breaking the law." She hesitated for the first time, her pen hovering over the clipboard. "Don't get dramatic. I have the right to perform inspections when necessary." "No, you don't." My voice was steady, low, the kind of tone that carries weight. "There's no HOA out here. And even if there was, no one walks into my house without my say-so. You think you have power because of that clipboard. You're playing a game you don't understand." Her lips curled into a sneer. "Oh, I understand perfectly. You're just another man who thinks he's above the rules. I'll have the county on you faster than you can." That's when her words stopped cold. Her gaze had shifted to the wall behind me. I turned slightly, knowing exactly what she was looking at. My federal badge, mounted in a simple oak frame, hung above the desk. It wasn't just a piece of metal, it was years of service, late nights, and cases that could have gone bad in a heartbeat. She was staring at it like it was a snake ready to strike. Her voice cracked slightly when she spoke again. You're law enforcement." I gave her a slow, measured nod. "Retired federal agent, and I know exactly how the law works down to the letter. Do you know what happens when someone trespasses into a private residence?" She blinked, her confidence draining as the weight of the situation settled in. I was just following HOA protocol. I stepped closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head to look at me. "You're on private property. You have no jurisdiction here. And the fact that you stepped inside after being told not to, that's breaking and entering." Her face flushed. "I didn't mean save it." I interrupted. "I could have you arrested right now. One call, and the sheriff's deputy would be here in 20 minutes. She shifted her weight, her high heels clicking nervously on the floorboards. "Let's not get carried away. Maybe we can talk this through." I folded my arms. "Funny. A minute ago, you were all about rules and compliance. Now you want to talk." Her composure was crumbling, but she still tried to salvage some authority. "You don't need to make this a bigger issue than it is. I was just trying to maintain community standards." I walked to the doorway, holding it open. "There is no community out here, just me, the trees, and the law I know better than you ever will. Now, If you want to leave without me pressing charges, you'll walk out that door right now." She didn't move, her pride keeping her frozen. I waited, watching her face shift between anger and fear. Then she muttered something under her breath, too low for me to catch, and finally stormed past me. The sound of her heels on the porch boards was sharper this time, more frantic. When she reached her SUV, she spun back around, her face flushed red. "This isn't over. I'll bring the board here." "You'll see." I stepped onto the porch, leaning against the post. "Bring whoever you want. But next time, don't set foot past my driveway unless you have a warrant. Understand?" She glared, but I could see the doubt in her eyes now. The badge had rattled her, even if she wouldn't admit it. With a huff, she climbed into her SUV, slammed the door, and sped off down the driveway, kicking up dust in her wake. I stood there for a long moment, the quiet settling back over the property like a blanket. But I knew this wasn't the last time I'd see her. People like her don't back down easily, and if she thought she could intimidate me with her HOA nonsense, she was in for a rude awakening. I knew from the second that white SUV disappeared down my driveway that this wasn't the end of it. HOA Karens don't let go. They dig in like ticks, convinced their authority stretches as far as they can wave a clipboard. I spent the rest of the afternoon splitting firewood, the steady thud of my axe helping me clear the irritation from my head. But deep down, I knew she'd be back. Sure enough, 2 days later, I heard the same sound of tires on gravel, this time louder, bolder, like she was announcing her arrival. I put down the splitting maul and wiped the sweat from my neck just as her SUV came to a stop. She wasn't alone this time. There was a man with her mid-50s, gray suit, shiny shoes that didn't belong in the mountains. He looked like a lawyer who'd never cut wood or patched a roof in his life. Karen climbed out first, already holding her clipboard like a sword. "We're here for a formal inspection," she said before I could get a word in. And this time, I brought our legal advisor. I leaned on my axe handle. "Lady, I told you this land isn't under any HOA. You're wasting your time and his." The man cleared his throat, adjusting his tie like the dust offended him. "Sir, I'm representing the Lakeview Community Association. It's our understanding that your property falls within our expanded district, and there are several violations that need to be addressed. Violations I let out a short, dry laugh. This is a cabin, not a condo. There's no district out here. Did you two even check the county line before marching up my driveway?" Karen smirked, undeterred. "We don't need to check. I've been doing this for years. Those garish shutters on your windows, that rusted old sign on the fence, everything about this place screams neglect. I'm giving you 1 week to bring it up to standard." My patience snapped like a dry twig. 1 week, I stepped forward, close enough that she had to tilt her head back. "You don't get to give me deadlines on my own land." "Do I make myself clear?" Karen's face flushed, but she took another step toward me anyway, heels digging into the dirt like she wanted to mark her territory. "Don't you raise your voice at me. This is about community pride. If you can't handle that, maybe you don't belong here." "Don't belong here," I echoed. "I've lived through things you wouldn't survive a single day of. This cabin was built with my own hands, board by board. I don't need a self-appointed queen and her lawyer telling me what pride looks like." The man in the suit shifted uncomfortably, but Karen wasn't done. She marched past me toward the porch, her eyes fixed on the cabin door like she was daring me to stop her. "Hey," I barked, stepping in front of her. "You cross that line again, and we're going to have a real problem." She folded her arms, defiant. "What are you going to do? Intimidate me with that badge of yours?" I stared at her, silent for a moment. The wind rustled the pines behind us, carrying the sharp smell of sap. "I don't need to intimidate anyone," I said finally. "But I will protect what's mine. You're not setting foot inside that cabin again." Karen tilted her head, eyes flashing with something between challenge and spite. "Then I'll call the sheriff. We'll see who's right." I took a step closer, my voice low and deliberate. "Go ahead. Call him. The sheriff's department knows me. They know this land. And they'll tell you the same thing I'm telling you. This isn't your jurisdiction." The man in the suit finally spoke, his tone hesitant. "Karen, maybe we should quiet," she snapped, cutting him off. He's bluffing. I didn't break eye contact. Bluffing. You saw the badge on my wall. That wasn't for decoration. I know how the law works. And right now, you're walking a fine line between harassment and trespassing. One more step, and I'll make sure the sheriff writes it up in black and white. For a moment, silence stretched between us. Her jaw tightened, but I could see a flicker of doubt behind her glare. Still, she wasn't the type to admit defeat. Fine, she spat. But this isn't over. We'll come back with paperwork. You'll regret this attitude. I leaned slightly on my axe, my expression calm but firm. Bring whatever paperwork you want. Just remember this next time you step on my porch without permission, I'll treat it like what it is, a violation of the law. She turned on her heel, muttering under her breath, and stomped back to her SUV. The lawyer followed, clearly embarrassed to be caught in her wake. As they drove off, I watched the dust cloud rise behind them. My jaw set. I knew she meant what she said. She'd come back. And, when she did, I'd be ready. It didn't take long for her threat to turn real. By the next afternoon, I heard that all too familiar rumble of the white SUV climbing the gravel road. I was sitting on the porch sharpening my hunting knife, the steady rhythm of steel against stone keeping my thoughts calm. Sure enough, Karen was back, and this time she brought reinforcements. 2 other people climbed out with her, one with another clipboard, and the other holding a camera like they were here to document a crime scene. Karen's heels struck the gravel with the same sharp rhythm as before. "We're conducting a formal documentation of violations," she announced, her voice loud enough to startle a crow from a nearby tree. "You will not interfere." I stood, resting my knife on the porch railing. "Ma'am, I already told you this isn't HOA property. Whatever game you're playing, it ends here. Now." The man with the camera raised it like he was about to start filming my porch, my face, my cabin, everything. I stepped down onto the dirt path, my boots planting firm in front of him. "Point that camera at me again," I said evenly, "and I'll consider it harassment. You'll regret it." The man lowered it fast, but Karen wasn't fazed. She smiled, the kind of smile that said she believed she was untouchable. "We'll see who regrets this. I'm reporting every violation, and the county will hear about your non-compliance." County, I laughed once, a hard sound. "Lady, you keep throwing around words like you know how the law works, but you're standing on land that's older than your HOA's founding papers. You can't rewrite boundaries with a clipboard." Ignoring me, she marched up the porch steps again, scanning the cabin door like she owned it. "This color," she said, pointing to the cedar stain, "is not approved. And this door hardware cheap. I'll add that to the list." "That's enough," I snapped. I moved to block her path, but she didn't stop. Instead, she glanced over my shoulder and saw the open cabin door. It was a warm day, so I'd left it ajar. Her smirk widened. "You can't hide violations inside." I stepped between her and the doorway, but she made a bold move. She sidestepped me and pushed the door fully open. My temper flared, but I didn't raise my voice yet. Instead, I followed her inside, my boots thudding against the old wood. She stopped mid-step, eyes locking on the far wall where my federal badge hung in a wooden frame above the desk. For a second, she didn't move. Her hand, still gripping the clipboard, trembled slightly. "Is that—" she began, her tone suddenly unsure. "Yeah," I said, my voice low. "That's exactly what it looks like. A federal badge. I earned it through 25 years of service. And I know exactly what you're doing here, harassing a private citizen on his own property without any legal standing. Do you have any idea how serious that is?" She swallowed, her eyes flicking between me and the badge. I didn't realize you were law enforcement." "Retired," I corrected, "but the law still applies, and I know it better than you. Right now, you're looking at trespassing, harassment, and illegal documentation on private property. Do you want to explain that to the sheriff?" The man with the camera was standing at the threshold, suddenly pale. "Karen," he whispered, "maybe we should leave quiet." She snapped, though her voice cracked. "We have rights to inspect community properties. This isn't community property." I shot back. I stepped closer, pointing at the floor beneath her heels. "This land has been mine since I bought it outright from the county. I don't answer to your board, your fake rules, or your so-called inspections. One more step out of line, and I'll be the one filing charges." For a moment, all I could hear was the sound of her breathing, sharp and fast. She glanced at the badge again, then at me, and I saw her confidence waver. Her fingers tightened on the clipboard, but she didn't write anything down. I reached for my phone on the table and held it up. "Want me to call the sheriff now? We can clear this up real quick." Her face paled, but her pride wouldn't let her back down entirely. "No need for that," she muttered, backing toward the door. We'll discuss this with the board." I followed her onto the porch, my tone calm but hard as iron. "You do that. And next time you show up here uninvited, bring a warrant or don't come at all, because I won't be so patient." Karen didn't reply. She stomped to her SUV, her two companions trailing behind like scared kids. As they drove off, I stayed on the porch, watching the dust rise. I knew this was far from over. People like her didn't just quit when they were embarrassed. They came back louder, meaner, and desperate to win. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of my old landline ringing. Hardly anyone had that number anymore, which meant it wasn't good news. Sure enough, when I picked it up, the voice on the other end was the county clerk, an old friend of mine named Bill. "Hey," Bill said, his tone wary. "I've got something here that might interest you. A complaint was filed against your property." I let out a dry laugh. "Let me guess. HOA Karen, you got it," Bill replied. "Apparently, there's a group of them claiming your cabin falls under their Lakeview expansion zone. It's nonsense, but they're making a lot of noise. They even called the sheriff's office asking for an inspection." "Sheriff's office," I repeated, feeling my blood pressure rise. "And what did they say?" Bill chuckled. "Sheriff Tom knows better. He told them to back off, but I'd be careful. They sound like they're cooking up something bigger. You know how these types are loud voices, no real power, but they try to wear you down. Let them try," I said firmly. "I'm not budging." After hanging up, I sat down at my kitchen table, thinking about my next move. Karen wasn't just some nosy neighbor. She was organized, and she had the kind of stubbornness that made people dangerous when they felt cornered. I knew she'd be back, and I needed to be ready. By mid-afternoon, I heard engines again this time. 2 vehicles. Karen's white SUV led the way, followed by a dark pickup truck with a custom logo on the side, Lakeview Community Security. I shook my head. Security out here? It was laughable. I stood on the porch as they pulled up, arms crossed, waiting. Karen got out first, looking smug as ever. Beside her was a tall, broad man dressed in a black uniform with a fake-looking badge pinned to his chest. He had the build of a gym rat, but the expression of someone who didn't think before acting. "Mr." She glanced at her clipboard, pretending she didn't know my name. "Mr. Daniels. We're here for an official inspection and to enforce compliance." "Compliance with what?" I asked flatly. "With HOA regulations," she said, her voice sharp. "And this time, we have security with us." She gestured to the man beside her like he was some kind of hired muscle. I gave him a slow once-over. "You working for the county?" I asked. He shifted uncomfortably. I'm with the Lakeview Association's private security team." "Private security," I repeated, smirking. "So basically, a rent-a-cop with no authority on my property." Karen bristled. "He's here to ensure there are no confrontations. You have a history of being uncooperative." Uncooperative. I took a step forward, my boots crunching the gravel. "You've trespassed onto my land twice, and now you're bringing back up like this is some kind of war. What's next?" "A bulldozer." Karen's smile didn't falter. "If that's what it takes to bring this place up to standard, yes." That was enough. I stepped back into the cabin, leaving the door wide open. Karen's eyes followed me as I walked to the wall where my federal badge hung in its frame. I grabbed the badge, along with my retired ID, and stepped back outside. I held them up so both of them could see. "You know what this means," I said, my voice steady. "This means I know the law, and I have connections that go far beyond your little board meetings. You're trespassing, you're harassing, and if you don't turn those vehicles around right now, I'll call Sheriff Tom and have you both cited." The so-called security guard's eyes went wide when he saw the badge. "Karen, maybe we should not a chance," she snapped, though her voice was less confident now. "This is our jurisdiction. He's bluffing." I stepped closer, close enough for her to see the years of work etched into my face. "Bluffing? You think a federal badge is a bluff? One call, Karen. One. And the sheriff will haul your SUV out of here with you in cuffs if you're not careful." The guard shifted nervously. "Karen, I really think fine," Karen barked. "We'll leave. But this isn't over. We'll bring this to the county board if we have to." "Good luck with that," I said. "They'll laugh you out of the building when they see the property lines. I have the deeds, the maps, and the law on my side." She glared at me like she wanted to burn my cabin down with her eyes, but she said nothing more. Instead, she spun on her heel and stomped back to the SUV. The guard followed, shaking his head as if he'd had enough of her theatrics. I stayed on the porch, watching them leave. The forest was quiet again, but the tension still lingered. I knew this was only round 3, and if Karen wanted a fight, I was ready to end it on my terms. I knew that letting Karen keep the upper hand, even for a second, was a mistake I couldn't afford. People like her thrive on fear and hesitation, and I had neither. So that night, after she and her so-called security left, I sat at my kitchen table with a notepad and my old laptop mapping out exactly how I'd turn the tables. The first thing I did was call Sheriff Tom. We'd worked together years ago when I was still active in federal service. Tom's a straight shooter, the kind of man who doesn't like bullies, especially the HOA type. "Tom," I said, once I got him on the line, "you're about to get a flurry of complaints about my property. I want you to know it's all noise. Karen, the one running the Lakeview HOA, has crossed the line. She's trespassing, harassing me, and now bringing private security onto my land." I could almost hear him rolling his eyes. "Figures. I've had a dozen calls from that woman this month. She thinks the whole county answers to her. Don't worry, I'll back you if she tries anything." "You still have your deed paperwork, right?" "Of course," I said. "I keep it locked in my desk." "Good," Tom replied. "If she comes back, call me directly. I'll set her straight." With that reassurance, I spent the next hour digging out the old property deeds and county maps. I made copies of every document proving that my cabin and the surrounding land were free from any HOA jurisdiction. I wanted Karen to see, in black and white, just how wrong she was. The next morning, I set the paperwork out on my porch table. I even cleaned the surface, knowing full well she'd be back. Sure enough, by early afternoon, the white SUV was climbing the driveway again. This time, she was alone. No lawyer, no camera guy. No fake security. I suspected the last encounter had scared off her reinforcements. She stepped out, still carrying that clipboard, but I noticed the tightness in her shoulders. Her confidence had cracks now. "Karen," I called, leaning back in my chair on the porch. "You're persistent, I'll give you that. But today, we're going to have a different conversation." She approached, her eyes narrowing at the papers neatly stacked on the table. "What's this proof?" I said, tapping the top page. "This is the county deed for my property, signed, notarized, and filed long before Lakeview HOA was even formed. And this," I added, pulling out another sheet, "is a map that shows your so-called district ends 3 miles south of here. You're trespassing." Again. Karen's lips pressed together in a thin line as she scanned the documents. I could tell she wanted to argue, but the papers didn't lie. "Maybe there's been a mistake," she muttered. "There's no mistake," I replied. "You came onto my land, harassed me, and tried to impose rules that have nothing to do with me. I could have pressed charges already. I still might." Her eyes flickered, but she tried to regain her composure. "I was just trying to maintain standards. Standards." I cut her off. "You don't know a thing about this place or the people who live out here. We don't need someone in a blazer and heels dictating how our homes should look. We take care of our own, and we respect each other's space. Something you clearly don't understand." She opened her mouth. But I wasn't done. I leaned forward, my voice low and steady. "Do you realize how bad this could get for you? trespassing onto federal property, because yes, parts of my land still fall under federal protection can result in fines and jail time. And you stepped into my home without permission. That's breaking and entering. I could have had you arrested the moment you crossed my threshold." Karen blinked, her breath catching slightly. "You wouldn't, wouldn't I?" I said, holding her gaze. "Do you want me to make a call to Sheriff Tom right now? He'd be here in 15 minutes. For a long moment, silence stretched between us. I could see her pride battling with her fear, her ego straining to hold on while reality started to sink in. Finally, she lowered the clipboard slightly, her fingers tightening on its edge. "What do you want?" she asked, her tone sharper but softer than before. "What I want," I said, "is simple. You and your HOA leave me and my cabin alone. You don't step foot on this land again. And you stop filing false complaints. If I get even one more letter from you, I'll hand all this evidence I tapped the documents on the table to the county attorney." "Understand." Karen stared at me for a moment, her jaw tightening, but she didn't argue. Instead, she turned on her heel, walking briskly back to her SUV. She didn't say another word as she slammed the door and drove off. I sat back in my chair watching her taillights vanish down the driveway. I had the upper hand now, but I knew her type. She wasn't done yet. If I wanted this to end once and for all, I'd need to make the next move. After Karen's last visit, I decided to go on the offensive. I wasn't going to sit around and wait for her next stunt. People like her needed to be stopped with something they couldn't argue against cold, hard evidence. That evening, I gathered every scrap of documentation I had. The property deed, county tax records, and photographs of the original purchase agreement went into a neat folder. I even found an old survey map showing that my land had been privately owned since before Lakeview HOA existed. If she wanted to test me, I was ready to bury her with facts. The next morning, I made a call to Sheriff Tom. "I'm done waiting," I told him. "Karen and her board think they can rewrite county lines. I want to file a formal harassment complaint." "You've got enough evidence?" Tom asked, his tone calm but interested. "Plenty," I said, "and I've got her trespassing caught on my trail cameras." Trail cameras, I smiled to myself. "Yeah, I set them up last winter after a bear came too close for comfort. Turns out they're just as good for catching nosy HOA presidents." Tom chuckled. "All right, bring it in. I'll take care of the paperwork and make sure this doesn't drag out any longer." By noon, I was sitting in Tom's office, the folder spread out on his desk. He leafed through it with that slow, careful attention of a man who's seen every kind of dispute but still knows when something's dead serious. "This is solid," he said, tapping one of the photos. "And with these camera images, we've got her on video stepping into your cabin. That's breaking and entering. No question." I nodded. "I'm not looking to throw her in jail unless I have to, but I want this nonsense to stop. For good." Tom leaned back in his chair. "I'll call her down here. We'll have a conversation. If she refuses to back off, we'll press charges." "Sound good." "Sounds perfect," I said. Karen didn't know I'd be there when Tom called her to the station later that afternoon. I stayed quiet in the corner of the sheriff's office as she walked in, clipboard in hand, still wearing that bright blazer like armor. "Mrs. Parker," Tom began, using her full name with a tone that made it sound more like a summons than a greeting. "We need to talk about your repeated visits to Mr. Daniel's property." Karen blinked when she saw me in the corner. Her confidence faltered, but she tried to mask it with a smile. "Sheriff, I'm just trying to uphold community standards. He's the one being difficult." Tom didn't flinch. "Community standards don't apply to his land. I've reviewed the property records myself. You and your HOA have no jurisdiction there. None." Karen's smile wavered. "But the board, Mrs. Parker," Tom interrupted, his tone firm. "You entered his home without permission. That's a crime. We have the footage and multiple witnesses. If Mr. Daniels decides to press charges, you could face serious consequences." Karen's head snapped toward me, her face paling. "You wouldn't." I stood, stepping forward. "Wouldn't I? You think you can march into my home, insult everything I've built, and then threaten me with fake rules. I've had enough of your harassment. One more step onto my land, and I'll press charges so fast you won't have time to call your board." Karen's hand tightened on her clipboard, but I saw the fight drain out of her eyes. She glanced at Tom, who gave her a look that could cut steel. "This is your warning," Tom said. "Stay off his property. If I hear one more complaint from you or your board, I'll make sure it's dealt with by the county attorney." "Do you understand?" Karen swallowed hard. "I understand." "Good," I said, my voice calm but firm. "We're done here." She nodded once, her pride wounded, and hurried out of the office. The sound of her heels clicking on the tile floor faded, leaving only silence and the faint hum of the sheriff's ceiling fan. Tom looked at me, shaking his head. "That woman's trouble with a capital T. You handled this better than most folks would have." I shrugged. "I've dealt with worse than a clipboard-wielding HOA president, but I appreciate your help." "Any time," he said. "Something tells me this won't be the last time we hear about her, but at least now she knows where the line is." That night, back at the cabin, I sat on the porch with a fresh cup of coffee. The sun was setting behind the pines, painting the sky with streaks of orange and purple. For the first time in days, I felt the tension ease from my shoulders. Justice wasn't always about slamming someone with the law. Sometimes it was about standing firm, showing people like Karen that they couldn't push everyone around. And this time, she finally knew it. The days after my meeting with Sheriff Tom were the quietest I'd had in weeks. No more engines roaring up the gravel road, no more sharp heels clacking on my porch, and no more unwanted inspections. The cabin felt like itself again, peaceful, still, and mine. That first morning of true silence, I woke up before dawn. The embers from last night's fire were still glowing faintly, and the air was cool enough to see my breath. I brewed a pot of black coffee and stepped out onto the porch, taking in the smell of pine and wood smoke. The forest around me was waking up, and for the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe again. I leaned against the porch railing, watching the mist roll across the tree line. It reminded me why I built this cabin all those years ago, why I traded city noise for the sound of wind through the pines. Out here, life was simple. It was about hard work, honest hands, and the kind of freedom you couldn't buy with money. But people like Karen didn't understand that. They were so obsessed with control, with painting the world into neat, matching boxes, that they forgot what living truly meant. I took a slow sip of my coffee, feeling the warmth spread through me, and thought about how close I'd come to letting her ruin the peace I'd built here. I decided to make sure it never happened again. After breakfast, I walked the property line, checking every trail camera and making sure the signs marking private property were freshly nailed and clear. If anyone, Karen or otherwise, thought about stepping onto my land uninvited, they'd know they weren't welcome. By midday, I sat on the porch with a clean deck of cards and played a few quiet rounds of solitaire, just listening to the world around me, the crackle of the fire, the call of a distant hawk, the steady rhythm of my own breathing. It all reminded me that peace wasn't just a state of mind, it was something you had to protect, sometimes with every ounce of strength you had. A week later, I got a call from Sheriff Tom. "She's done," he said simply. "Karen," I asked. "Yeah." The county board reviewed the harassment complaint, between the deed records, the footage from your cameras, and a few other colorful complaints they've had about her. They shut her down. She's no longer allowed to represent Lakeview HOA. I raised an eyebrow, even though he couldn't see me. "You're telling me they finally stripped her of her clipboard?" Tom laughed. "Something like that." "She's not happy about it, but she won't be bothering you anymore." "Good," I said. "I'll sleep better, knowing the forest's quieter for everyone now. Just don't go looking for trouble." Tom warned, "You've got your peace. Keep it." "I plan to," I said, and I meant it. That evening, I sat by the fire inside the cabin, watching the flames dance across the old stone hearth. I thought about the past few weeks, the trespasses, the arguments, the way Karen's eyes froze when she saw my badge. I'd spent years dealing with criminals, liars, and cheats, But there was something uniquely exhausting about facing someone who thought they were always right, no matter how wrong they were. Yet, in a way, I was grateful. It reminded me why I retired out here in the first place. I didn't leave the city because I was tired of the job. I left because I was tired of the noise, the constant battles for control, the people who'd forgotten how to respect boundaries. Out here, I could build my own life. A porch that smelled of fresh cedar, a cabin filled with memories and worn wood, a fire that burned bright against the cold nights. This wasn't just a place to live, it was a place to breathe, to heal, to remember who I was when the world wasn't demanding something from me. The stars came out that night, clear and sharp against the black sky. I sat on the porch again, wrapped in an old flannel jacket, listening to the quiet hum of the forest. There was no sound of engines, no flash of a clipboard in the dark, just the wilderness and me. And as I sat there, I felt something I hadn't felt in a while, a deep, steady sense of gratitude, not just because Karen was gone, but because I'd stood my ground. I'd defended my home, my land, my peace. That was something worth holding on to. Sometimes life tests us with people who don't know when to stop, people who think they can walk all over our boundaries. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's this peace isn't handed to you. You have to fight for it, protect it, and hold it close when the world tries to take it away. If you've ever had to stand your ground against someone who wouldn't listen, you know exactly what I mean. And if you enjoyed this story, I'd love for you to stick around. Subscribe for more stories like this. Share your thoughts. And maybe take a moment to appreciate the quiet places in your own life.